Welcome to the Infrastructure for AI Conference for 2021, brought to you by Machine Learning Africa. And we want to thank our hosts, IBM, or our sponsors, IBM and Meltwater, for helping us out. As we know, artificial intelligence brings about enormous benefits to organizations and has the power to transform many businesses and industries. So that's what we'll be looking at today, especially things like how to build suitable infrastructure for AI, on-prem or cloud storage, what computing power do you need? So I'm actually going to start immediately. Well, I'm going to get our first speaker up to start immediately. We're going to be talking to Randy Arsenault from IBM, who will be taking us through building the right information architecture, which is crucial to AI success. So he was kind enough to give me an IA and an AI in his heading. Building the right information architecture is crucial to AI success. So we'll hand over to Randy.
Great. Thank you very much, Claire. Let me just bring up my presentation. And welcome, everybody. Thanks for inviting me and thanks for joining. So appreciate it. Can you hear me okay, Claire? Yes?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll take that as a yes. Thank you. So again, thanks everybody and welcome. Thanks for joining. So my name is Randy Arsenault. I'm a global market development exec for IBM. I'm actually sitting here in Boston. So morning for me, afternoon for you. Good afternoon. And again, thank you for the invitation from the team. So I want to take some time today and walk you through a discussion around, the theme of the conference is infrastructure for AI. So we want to talk about the importance of data services and the data persistence layer as you're developing your AI, machine learning, and deep learning architecture within your environment, both today and moving into the future. So hopefully, as folks know, IBM, quick legal disclaimer. I have to put this in here or else the attorneys get upset, the barristers get upset. So I'll give you a moment to read this and then we'll continue, but pretty standard disclaimer. So again, thank you for ML Africa and our hosts for inviting us today. So about 50 years ago, a couple of years ago, or now a little bit past this point, was the 50th anniversary of the moon landing. The first time that humans, that our civilization mustered the technology and the capability and the wherewithal to actually put humans on the moon, which was a pretty amazing feat. So IBM was very directly involved in this launch. There were about 4,000 experts across multiple disciplines within NASA and the private sector, and IBM was a huge contributor to this. It was really a transformational event in the sense that it took computing power combined with the ability to do space travel, in effect, to really create what was a salient event in human history, the landing on the moon. So fast forward 50 years later now, we're continuing to apply the same logic and the same techniques and the same research methodologies to problem domains that we're facing today. The most obvious of which probably is the global COVID-19 pandemic, which we'll talk a little bit about. So the purpose here is just to illustrate that we've been at this, excuse me, for a very long time. The moon landing really ushered in what was often referred to as the third industrial revolution, where again, computing was harnessed in a way that made something like a moon landing possible. And now we've gone to the point where we can begin to apply in what we're calling the fourth industrial revolution, much more ubiquitous computing to other significant problems. So a great example of that, of course, again, is the fight against COVID-19. So we teamed with our partner, NVIDIA, using, the Summit supercomputer. Now, this is a video, which I'm going to attempt to play here. You may not hear the sound, but hopefully you'll be able to see the animation. So IBM and NVIDIA, working in conjunction with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory here in Tennessee, has been developing a research protocol around identifying modules and compounds that have a higher probability of binding to the spike protein, which is the protein that encapsulates COVID-19 molecules. And that's what makes it so dangerous, is that it's what is able to allow it to attach to our cells and begin to replicate and produce, the damage that we see. So using the Summit supercomputer, which is at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in their Exascale Computing Center, we've used summit to analyze 8,000 different compounds which were used. And this, by the way, happened in the spring of last year. So we're actually now past this point. And in fact, this research has led to the introduction of the most recent vaccines, the vaccines from both Moderna and Pfizer. So pretty amazing technology. So let's think about putting the context of that kind of computing power and where we are in our industry today in a slightly different context. So one of the measurements that we use to look at technology adoption and the influence of technology in our day-to-day life, we did an interesting kind of study where we looked at some pretty significant and transformative technologies over the last several years and how long it took those technologies from their introduction to reach 50 million active users. So we start with the automobile. It took about 62 years for automobiles to go from introduction to the public to 50 million active users. Similarly, the telephone took about 50 years to reach 50 million users. Residential electric power took 46 years. Credit cards took about 28 years. Interestingly, fun fact, IBM was the creator of the magnetic strip technology that's used in virtually every credit card and ATM card in the world today. Television took about 22 years. Automated teller machines, 18. So you can see as technology evolves and moves forward, the adoption cycles continue to shrink and shrink. Debit cards were about 12 years. The World Wide Web took 7 years to go from nothing to 50 million users. Services like PayPal took 5 years to reach 50 million users. YouTube took 4 years. So you can see the trend here happening in this technology space. Facebook took about 3 years to reach 50 million users and is still growing very rapidly. Twitter, 2 years. And now we get into a much more compressed time frame. So the Angry Birds game that everybody was playing like crazy took 35 days. And what is still today the world's largest containerized microservices-based application, which is Pokemon Go, took 19 days to reach 50 million users. So what you can see here is that as technology evolves and as our ability to apply that technology evolves, the rate at which users can adopt it is accelerating dramatically. You know, the services are now going to be able to reach 50 million users in a matter of hours. So we're no longer in the range of days, we're now in really hours. So as a provider in this space, as a vendor in this space, we view this in terms of obviously kind of the market opportunity. So there is a huge opportunity within the market space. Based on some IDC research, we can see here that the market this year is expected to be about $49 billion globally, moving to $98 billion. So almost doubling by 2023. So it's growing at an alarmingly fast rate. IBM is currently the number one shareholder within the IBM market worldwide. From a data services perspective, our portfolio options for IBM Spectrum Scale, Cloud Object Storage, and Spectrum Discover are the banner products of the lead offerings. I'll talk a little bit more about those that are helping us to really achieve this number one position in the market. Now, there's a lot of adoption activity happening within the enterprise and within industry. You know, as with a lot of technology trends, things like AI and machine learning began in academia and research communities and rapidly became more commoditized and evolved to be used within the enterprise. So again, research conducted recently showed that about 80% of firms worldwide expect to use AI in some form, and they expect that usage to increase over the next 2 years. So we're seeing, again, this very rapid, very kind of asymptotic adoption rate. And about 89% agree that there are some challenges, however, as they begin to incorporate more AI into more of their enterprise workflows, they're bumping up against some implementation challenges. And one of the biggest ones is data. As you can imagine, the volumes and velocity of the data that are being used in these AI environments are growing at an alarming rate as well. And managing these huge and growing volumes of data becomes increasingly challenging. So we'll talk about some ways that we can mitigate that and some approaches you can take to develop an environment that's best suited to this new world. So one of the other things that's happening is that the discussions that you and your clients and your end user constituents are having are also rapidly evolving. So, you know, I've been in technology for a long time, so I've kind of been at this for a while, and I've seen a very clear shift away from the deep technology discussion. So, we're speaking less about the interesting scientific innovations around clock speeds and compute densities and caching and, interconnect speeds and the things that drive the technology infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, towards a much more functionally oriented discussion about things like, how can we get services developed and in the hands of our users more quickly? How can we use things like containerization of microservices? What does hybrid multi-cloud really mean in terms of my adoption and my infrastructure model? How do I make sure that I have cyber resiliency and AI infused throughout every part of my workload portfolio? And how do I prepare myself or ready my environment to take advantage of technologies like blockchain and in the future quantum computing? So you're seeing a real shift away from kind of the ground level technology discussions to more usage-based and functionally based discussions. Now, there are a million examples of this in day-to-day life, which is pretty interesting. Companies like Under Armour, a global sportswear provider, uses very specific, very targeted, what's often referred to as know your customer technology to closely monitor, kind of for better or for worse in some cases, to closely monitor and surveil the behavior of individual consumers and tailor your experience specifically to you as an individual. So as opposed to looking at, very broad demographic data and profiles around, gender and age group and location and geography, et cetera, it's targeting your usage patterns, your very specific interests based on, precision retail and tracking data. There's many other examples of this, whether it's in agricultural delivery and kind of supply chain for food and nutritional products worldwide. Precision medicine is a very rapidly evolving field in which, organizations, research institutes in combination with the private sector, COVID, again, great example of this, is using this advanced technology to develop targeted therapies, whether it's immunotherapy or specific drug development to treat diseases on a much more targeted and much more effective level. So this drives what we kind of refer to within IBM as the AI ladder. It's a journey. So implementing AI is not a direct point to point, do this, do that, do this. It's not necessarily always linear. It involves some steps and some basic best practices. The first of which is collect. The first thing you've got to do is figure out where your data is, how to harness it, how to access it, how to build that foundation of, data at the right place and the right time and the right cost structure. Organizing that data implies making sure you have trusted supply chain and chain of custody for the data, so it's reliable. You need to make sure that it's consistent at all stages in its life cycle, and you can measure it and inspect it and be able to cleanse, catalog, govern, and otherwise produce metadata. Analyze is really the important stage where we begin to develop the models that are fed by that data and are used for decision support and to, really combine both structured and unstructured data and deploy it securely. And finally, infuse. Infusion is kind of the highest order state where we're now able to actually take the results and the actionable information produced by those models and infuse it throughout other parts of the organization. Now, one of the things that we say a lot is that there is no AI without IA. And what we mean is you can't have an AI implementation or an AI market model if you don't have an information architecture to support it. Now, the emphasis has tended to be on more of the control plane side of AI. So looking at modeling technologies, looking at, massive amounts of data using, stream technology and stream processing. Well, it turns out that the bottom, the data layer, the data plane is equally important, in some cases even more important, to truly harness the value. So there's a great quote from an MIT Massachusetts Institute of Technology research study. No amount of AI algorithmic sophistication will overcome a lack of data architecture. Bad data is paralyzing. So this is kind of the new version of garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have trustworthy, reliable, vettable data, then your conclusions that are produced by your AI models and your machine learning algorithms are going to be less reliable, less defensible, and in fact, in some cases, they can actually introduce significant risk. So from a legal and compliance perspective, it's critically important that you have an information infrastructure that can work with your AI models and your AI workloads. So that introduces kind of the data challenge that I touched on a little while ago. As this technology evolves, these environments are becoming inherently more complex, right? So a lot of vendors are producing a lot of point solutions and a lot of targeted solutions that don't span your entire infrastructure environment and make entry point cost high, makes complexity high, manageability becomes very difficult. The cost of moving data around becomes more difficult. It's less scalable. You have less obvious and overt connectivity. So it really creates a pretty challenging environment. So want to talk about some ways that we can apply technologies, and I'm going to, of course, give you kind of the IBM portfolio view of the world, ways that we can apply technology in a consistent, repeatable way to solve some of these problems. And we'll talk specifically, I'll give you some examples of where this is taking place. I'll give you some client references. I won't spend a lot of time here. Just so folks know, we have a very, very broad and deep portfolio of data and data services technologies, from the world's fastest and highest aerial density flash storage systems up to and including things like tape, long-term immutable object storage, cloud-based, either on-prem or in the cloud storage, and some interesting technologies which ironically are making a big comeback, one of which is tape. Tape has been around for decades. It's considered to be kind of an old, dead, linear media technology. In fact, as data volumes are growing remarkably fast, a lot of cloud service providers and enterprises are finding new life in tape as a perfect tier and a perfect persistence mechanism and vehicle for huge volumes of relatively static data, archival data, or data that's accessed less frequently and is immutable. So tape is really being adopted. In fact, the largest users of linear tape technology in the world today are the huge Apex cloud service providers, whether it's Google or Microsoft or AWS or others. So the portfolio is designed to really provide the ability to support that journey to AI. So as I mentioned earlier, AI is not just a switch that you turn on. It is something that you develop over time. You have to have a very pragmatic, very focused approach. You want to do it in a way that drives down complexity and cost and improves open standards-based integration throughout the life cycle. So whether you're on the collection end of the AI workflow and you're looking at things like bringing in massive volumes of data, staging it, operating on it, being able to provide very highly parallelized low latency access, using huge multi-petabyte object stores, organizing using technologies like our Spectrum Discover metadata optimization platform, and ultimately being able to rapidly analyze and repeatably analyze using things like Spectrum Scale, which is our global parallel file system. And I'll talk a little bit about some of these things. Now, we focus a lot on the ability to drive the AI pipeline. So from ingest all the way through to insight, the ability to, again, pervasively infuse your environment with the decision value and the value of this AI data. I talked a little while ago earlier on about applications of this data to things like COVID research. So as I mentioned, IBM and NVIDIA working with the Summit supercomputer and the National Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratory. Summit is, as of today, although it will ultimately be superseded, I'm sure, because it's kind of an arms race, the world's fastest supercomputer, delivering 2.5 terabytes per second of sustained throughput, has about 500 petabytes of Spectrum Scale-based architecture. The compute nodes are based on our Power 9 chips and NVIDIA Tesla V100 core GPUs. So incredibly fast, over 200 petaflops of peak performance. So again, this was used in early COVID research, early COVID assay analysis to analyze about 8,000 possible compounds that would otherwise have taken months or years using traditional compute technology in the span of about 4 days. So it dramatically accelerated the early research cycles for COVID research, both in terms of therapeutic treatments as well as vaccine candidates. So the big challenge that large HPC and AI workloads like that often have is that there can be bottlenecking on data. So as you're implementing more models and trying to challenge, use the Challenger model and train those more quickly, more rapidly, more repeatably, it's extremely important that, for example, if you're using GPU acceleration, which many are, you need to keep those GPUs fed. You need to have a data layer and a data services layer that can sustain high enough interconnect rates and high enough feed rates to keep those systems busy. Otherwise, you've got very expensive, high-density compute resources, which spend a lot of their time sitting idle. So our entire storage and data services portfolio is oriented towards optimizing that throughput, minimizing latency, and ensuring that all the way from the collection process to the analysis and infusion process, you are maximizing throughput, maximizing productivity, and moving data through the pipeline as quickly, efficiently, and reliably as possible. So you don't end up with an extremely fast compute infrastructure that's spending most of its time sitting in traffic, because that's not constructive and it's not a good investment of your resource or time. So the simplest way that we kind of think about this is we use the analogy of, a flow system, water, for example, and we want to look at, roughly speaking, a performance tier that is ultra high throughput, ultra low latency, and more of a capacity tier, which is cost optimized. So you get sort of performance optimized on one end and more cost optimized without sacrificing any functionality on the capacity side. So how do we apply these technologies? Specifically, we'll be talking about Spectrum Scale, Discover, and Cloud Object Storage, which again are the three principal elements of our portfolio targeted at this space. How do we apply those and architect for these particular use cases? So if we think about on the ingest side, think about data as water. So your organization or entity or agency is responsible for taking water from some sort of a supply, maybe a municipal supply, and then treating it and doing some different things with it to leverage value from it. So you might take it directly from that supply and use it for things like, watering your crops. So it's minimally refined. It doesn't have a lot of filtration or cleansing, and it's just used directly. There may also be, or there will also likely be, a need for water that's used for cleaning. Take a shower, wash your clothes, whatever the case may be, wash your dishes. And of course, then there is water that's needed for drinking to survive. So the point here is that there are a number of different services that are applied to this water, which you take in from the municipal supply, before it is ultimately ready to be used for its end purpose. And any number of these can be used as a particular flow, and your environment needs to be able to accommodate all of them, right? So you've got to be able to have a very high ingest front end and, think about, again, data streaming in from multiple sources, whether it's Kafka or some kind of a Hadoop-based environment or Spark. You've got huge volumes of data. You've got to very quickly be able to understand what that data is. Ideally, you want to be able to classify it and tag it on the fly so you don't have to stop the process and have a data scientist spending his or her time doing manual classification. So you want to make sure that you can do that in an automated, repeatable, and very, very stream efficient manner. And that's where our Spectrum Discover solution comes in. Spectrum Discover is an advanced metadata management and curation facility. It supports multiple data types, multiple protocols, and provides a single namespace for metadata, just as we do for the data itself. So again, it provides you with the ability to very rapidly, in a single workflow, ingest that data, classify it, categorize it, tag it, and even perform actions based upon the metadata payload associated with it. So all of these things kind of converging towards changing the way people think about architecting their infrastructure. So one of the interesting things that's happened since the early emergence of public cloud as an accepted platform within the enterprise is that most organizations are using more than one cloud. So back in the early days, you had your data center running your mission critical workloads, and you had, perhaps an Amazon Web Services account where you used for some of your, lower security, lower priority, more elastic workloads. Nowadays, 94% of the organizations that we've surveyed, and this is based on an IDC commissioned survey, 94% are using not just one cloud, but multiple clouds. And in fact, at the most recent survey iteration, about 60% of them were using 5 or more public clouds. So think about the complexity that becomes apparent as you go from a traditional on-prem model to using up to 5 clouds in addition to that. This is what drove IBM a couple of years ago to invest $34 billion in acquiring Red Hat. Red Hat has been a technology leader and an innovation leader in this space for 20 years, more than that, actually. We have a very strong partnership with them. Bringing IBM and Red Hat together enables us to deliver a full solution of systems and infrastructure technologies to help clients adopt and accelerate their multi-cloud implementation. We've also established long partnerships and strong partnerships with companies like NVIDIA. We developed a reference architecture a couple years back with NVIDIA DGX and the SuperPod technology. We actually have a new one that's about to be published soon based on their new A100 GPU servers. So again, leveraging those same 3 portfolio elements, Spectrum Scale, Cloud Object Storage, and Discover, we've been able to work with NVIDIA to deliver high density, extremely fast, extremely efficient systems that can scale from a single, DGX server up to 9 DGX servers or 72 Tesla GPU implementation nodes in a single system. So this reference architecture was published again a couple of years ago. It was in late 2019. Again, the new one based on the next generation RTX technology will be coming out shortly. So great partnership and great examples of clients that are using this. I'll share one with you here right now. So we had a customer who is using this reference architecture, this NVIDIA and AI model using Spectrum Scale based on our ESS 3000 high performance data services and storage node. It gives them a tremendous amount of flexibility to roll out applications very quickly. They were trying to adopt Kubernetes and adopt specifically Red Hat OpenShift to modernize their infrastructure and leverage AI while maintaining, high performance, high throughput in their GPU environment. And they also wanted flexibility to support both containerized and non-containerized applications. And again, this is very common. A lot of organizations will have a mix of workloads that are still based on traditional, in some cases, old school, RDBMS based applications running on bare metal servers, all the way up to and including fully containerized applications. So by leveraging this NVIDIA, Red Hat, IBM partnership solution, they were able to exploit OpenShift as their multi-cloud platform and ESS 3000s to deliver high performance, low latency throughput, and have this data services layer that supports all of their applications, both legacy and next generation. Another great partnership, Cloudera. So Cloudera is a very widely used and widely known data services platform. There's some interesting things happening within the Cloudera space that actually work very well in terms of this reference architecture. But Cloudera is a great solution, a great big data and analytics solution for data management as well as for IT management. So not only does it deliver a very robust platform for high productivity, massively parallelized and high performance data access, it also provides a cost model that's very sustainable and very attractive to the folks who are provisioning the services and looking at the funding models. So it's a great solution for both. Now, what's happening this year is there is kind of a compelling event within the Cloudera space where clients are being required to upgrade to the new CDP platform, the Cloudera Data Platform, by the end of this year. And that's going to require, in some cases, some modernization initiatives around their data lake. We believe that we have the best solution for Cloudera clients with Spectrum Scale and Spectrum Storage to significantly lower TCO and really deliver a strong multi-platform, multi-protocol, multimodal support layer for all Cloudera implementations. So performs exceptionally well, scales again across Cloudera and non-Cloudera workloads within the enterprise, and delivers that robust set of data services at scale, highly resilient, and to support a full hybrid multi-cloud and containerization environment. Another great example is Splunk. Splunk, of course, is a very widely used platform within SEIM and other segments of the market. When in late 2018, when Splunk introduced their Smart Store architecture, where they were able to enable clients to disaggregate compute from storage and scale them independently, our Cloud Object Storage delivered a great platform for a Splunk Smart Store. So we can produce, incredibly high performance object storage that allows for larger data sets to be optimized and managed and actioned, so data services can be scaled up without a huge cost increase. And geodispersion provides higher levels of security within the Cloud Object Storage platform, and up to 55 gigabytes per second in linear scale from terabyte to petabyte scale. So a great solution for large, high volume Splunk environments that enables larger data sets to be used safely and with no sacrifice in performance. So last thing I'll touch on real quickly is the importance of data protection and cyber resiliency. Everybody is aware that, cyber threats are increasing at an alarming rate. So regardless of whether you're talking about your traditional, data center-based workloads behind your firewall, or those that are, AI-driven, containerized, cloud native, and perhaps scaling and moving frictionlessly back and forth between your on-premises environment and the cloud, the ability to provide very robust, very reliable encryption becomes absolutely critical. So one of the ways to mitigate risk and mitigate the risk or potential failure from a breach or a cyber event is to encrypt all the data, secure it with the highest possible certification required, whether it's, international standards, industry compliance standards, and make it, really tamper proof, make it immutable, lock it down, and make it safe so that it can't be changed or modified in any way. Including going as far as one of the interesting areas that IBM is investing a lot of research in right now, and we're seeing a lot of great traction, is in quantum computing, which is a fascinating topic that we could spend another hour on just on its own. But one of the ways that quantum computing can be applied in sort of a nefarious way is to crack encryption codes and encryption technology. So because we have at present the world's foremost quantum computing platform and practice and skill set, we are now developing encryption technologies and encryption algorithms that are quantum proof, so they can be prevented from being cracked using quantum computing. So we're thinking ahead in terms of how we're hardening our compute environment and our resilience. I talked a little bit about tape and immutable storage within Cloud Object Storage. These are further ways and further mechanisms by which you can provide the absolute maximum level of safety and security and reliability to your data. So by using things like immutable vaults within Cloud Object Storage, you've got data that's locked down, can't be changed, can't be deleted, has a compliant audit trail, all the way up to and including tape technology, which again, not only provides the most economical way to store massive volumes of fairly static data. A tape cartridge is itself, by definition, air-gapped. It is physically air-gapped. You can take a tape cartridge, physically remove it from the premises, put it in a secure facility elsewhere, and you've got 100% rock-solid, physically air-gapped data. So completely eliminating network threats. So there's the full spectrum here, from ingest, high-speed, high-performance, low-latency, flash-based data services, all the way up to and including linear media and the ability to leverage tape as a way to, or immutable vaults within Cloud Object Storage as a way to really enhance your security and your performance. So taking this all together, the AI-assisted workforce is here today. It's going to continue to be here in the future. It is the mechanism by which we will continue to provide competitive advantage, to deliver services to our clients and our end users, to improve quality of life, to improve, everything about the human condition culturally, socially, economically, whether it's from targeted consumer experiences in dining all the way up to and including, optimizing financial markets, legal compliance, taxation. Healthcare is a huge space for AI and machine learning and deep learning, strategy, conception and compilation, and edge computing. There's a million different areas where this is being applied. The message I want to leave you with is that you can unlock the true potential of AI and machine learning and deep learning if you have a smart, adaptive, open standards-based infrastructure that delivers the complete portfolio of data services from ingest through analysis, through infusion, through archive, and provides a single global namespace, a multi-protocol access across all of your workloads, both containerized and non-containerized. And you can get started with a small project, We've got all shapes and sizes of implementation models available, and we can help you to implement a model that works for you and your environment. So that brings me to the end. Thank you for your attention. I appreciate it. I know I talked through a lot of this, but I will wrap here. My contact information is on the screen here. Feel free to reach out to me. Happy to answer any questions you may have. With that, I guess I will turn the microphone back over to Claire. So Claire, over to you.
Thank you so much. Randy, you are staying till the end.
Yes, I will be here. Sorry. Okay,
I just wanted to check because we do have the panel coming up at the end. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that their questions will be answered at the end. I didn't mention that right in the beginning. So I just wanted there, just in case anyone has any questions, we can discuss them after everyone.
Yes, I will be here. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, great. We're going to move on quickly, just in case anyone does run over. Okay, apologies. We seem to have a connection problem. So we're going to go ahead with Chelsea's presentation. So Chelsea Nothard, Managing Director of Meltwater, she's going to take us through how to leverage the power of consumer data to gain a competitive advantage. So I'm going to hand over to you, Chelsea. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Claire. I'm just going to quickly share my screen with everybody. Thanks everyone for joining me for this presentation this afternoon. Today, I'm actually going to take you guys through audience insights and how to effectively leverage the power of social media data in order to gain better insights into your audiences. So we're going to be looking at Market Research 2.0, and we're going to be unpacking traditional market research methods and then looking at how AI and social listening are giving brands a competitive advantage when it comes to understanding the audiences that obviously matter to them the most. Okay, so just before we jump in, a very, very brief introduction. I'm Chelsea Nothard. I'm the Managing Director for the Account Executive Team at Meltwater Africa. If you haven't heard of Meltwater before, we are the global leaders in media intelligence and social analytics solutions. We actually track the largest corpus of public data in the world. So we help our 30,000 clients make more informed business decisions based on data-driven insights. And we actually call this concept outside insight. Not sure if anyone has come across that term before, but actually was developed by our CEO a couple of years ago. We have 60 offices across the world, and in 2020, we were recognized by G2 as one of the top products for marketers. So I guess coming in from an AI standpoint, Meltwater is actually one of the top 9 companies behind the recent AI acquisition boom as part of the race to acquire new data crunching science. So I'm really excited to share some learnings around data-driven tech with you today, specifically looking at AI technology. So we all know we're living through the age of digital transformation, and managing change is already an art when it comes to operating specifically in the digital media landscape. But in the wake of COVID-19, it's become more of an immediate need. So the question really is, are companies changing with the times? Our CEO, Jorn, once said that every company has external factors that impact future business performance, both positively and negatively. So mining external data to understand these is like having a stethoscope listening into Porter's 5 forces in real time. So it's an extremely powerful tool if you know how to harness it. So I'm sure you're all familiar with Porter's 5 forces. It's a well-known model for figuring out how competitive a company really is. And this is based on both external and internal factors. So these factors affect the current state and potential of power, which then has a direct relationship with performance. Suppliers, buyers, and competitive rivalry give a good indication of your current position in the market. While on the other hand, threat of substitution and new entry help you determine how sustainable your current methods are. And I think one of the most interesting ways of applying this model is actually in relation to managing change, which I'm sure we are all dealing with at the moment with the current pandemic. So shining a light on force 2 here in the purple, the power of buyers, this is where a great opportunity lies in terms of gaining a competitive edge. And this goes for multiple different industries and sectors. We live in a social data world where half the global population are active social media users. And with all of these real-time conversations comes more insight into our consumers. This is, however, provided we are open to listening and willing to be strategic with the use of that data. By investing in data and having the right tools at their disposal, companies can start looking and positioning themselves to thrive in these ever-changing environments, but I guess also to outsmart their competitors in whichever market they are operating in. Social media, as we all know and are very familiar with, is where all B2C consumers are engaging with brands and also being influenced into purchase decisions. And that is why the accuracy, but also the scale of social listening data is essential. I'm not sure how familiar the audience is when it comes to audience insights data or this particular data set, but this technology can help companies identify their audiences, understand who and what influences them, but also how they interact with each other and the world around them. These insights are obviously fundamental for business development and marketing success in the very digital world that we live in today. And this has obviously been catalyzed by, the global pandemic. The unfortunate reality is, though, that some companies are stuck in their old ways, led by marketers or execs, C-level execs, for a matter of fact, that go around making definitive statements like our customer does not buy online, and then sticks to that irrespective of what the data is actually telling them. And often these beliefs are informed by nothing more than legacy rather than any qualitative or quantitative insight. McKinsey very knowledgeably says marketers today require a deep understanding of how consumers engage with different types of media at each stage of the journey towards a purchase decision. And this really leads me onto some research that answers the question at hand. Why do insights, but audience insights specifically, really matter? And when you look at this, research stat from Serious Decisions, 60 to 70% of marketers admit they don't truly understand their buyers. So the reality that the vast majority of our industry is actually operating blind is quite scary. But what this also means is that there's a significant opportunity for organizations to gain the competitive edge. And this goes for, again, any market or industry or sector. Complementing the stat is a study carried out by Syntel that showed 70% of companies who are not working with qualitative buyer personas miss their revenue goals. So I guess what I'm pointing to is the fact that, audience data is not really a nice to have, especially in the current landscape that we are operating in. But in fact, audience insights are having a massive impact on real life results. While on the other hand, in the same study, 71% of those who exceeded their sales goals had documented personas. And these are just a handful of studies that support the importance of audience intel. But I guess at the end of the day, anyone on this platform or listening in here shouldn't need stats to tell them that the buyer personas are very important to their business. And that's because the premise that underpins these goes right down to basic human nature. So by that I mean audience insights make it easier for businesses and brands to empathize with their customers. So when we look at more traditional market research methods that marketers actually still use today, not only are the sample sizes incredibly small, but they come with a magnitude of other vulnerabilities. So if you look at this research study from HubSpot, they show on the right-hand side that most marketers use 3 to 5 buyer personas, and they define them mostly with surveys, focus groups, and interviews. So 3 very traditional marketing research approaches that I'm sure you guys will all be familiar with. So I quickly just want to unpack these and get a good understanding around, why these traditional market research methods, have shifted and changed. So let's look at surveys. In the case of surveys, answers are often disingenuous because people don't care. People tend to skip questions for the sake of data or even not take the survey altogether. We also then deal with issues of accessibility and question interpretation, which are prone to human errors, unfortunately. When we look at another, quite prominent method of research that a lot of organizations still use today, focus groups, we run into problems like it being very costly, participants being overbearing and dominating the conversation, and moderators impacting the direction of the discussion, which then impacts obviously the outcome of the data and the results of the study at the end of the day. Lastly, one-on-one interviews. So again, these are a question of budget, time consumption, and interpretation. Interviews can also be very resource intensive and rely heavily on the quality of that particular interviewer that you choose. But, having a look at all of these traditional research methods, probably the most significant drawback of inquiry here is that the data you collect is static. So let's say you spent lots of money on a focus group in January 2020 before COVID-19 really transpired. Do you think these findings would still be relevant now, a year later? I would say not. People's priorities and needs have changed, and this can happen all in the space of a few months. So the question really here is, if you are going to spend thousands of rands, dollars on consumer research, at least ensure it has a solid shelf life. In a 2018 podcast, my very favorite comedian, Ricky Gervais, actually commented on this. This was while he was doing some social media research for his up-and-coming shows. He said, "That's not a sample, that's just the world." So this is something that we at Meltwater realized back in 2001, and thus have invested in the technology to start making sense of the sea of digital breadcrumbs that consumers leave behind every second of every day. So what you see now on the screen is actually our audience intelligence platform, okay? And this audience insight tool uses AI to analyze patterns across thousands of data points in Twitter communities to create distinct audience segments, each with their own expansive profiles. And the benefit here is that you are segmenting by interest, attitude, and motivation rather than just demographics in isolation. So by pulling social listening data and rich social listening data into this audience intel tool, you're also getting a far more targeted and relevant view of who out there is actually interested in what you do or what you sell. So you're gleaning that data and marketing to them rather than the more traditional hypothesis, which says people of this age that look like this buy our product, so let's just blindly market to them. In addition, I think the most valuable thing about social data that we've mentioned is that it is not static. So it shifts and it evolves like the modern day consumer. It truly is the closest thing we have to a pulse on the world today. This is actually a really cool example. I'm not too sure how familiar you all are with a brand called Monzo. So this is actually a basic audience report that we pulled for Monzo Bank in the UK. So we can get a bit more of a practical idea or sense of the type of data points that we can analyze using this tool. So as you can see, Monzo's followers show us that 75% of their audience is male and aged between 18 and 24, so quite young. They are English and based out of London. They are influenced by individuals like Elon Musk, Barack Obama, and Monzo's own president himself, Tom Bloomfield. Publications that they trust include TechCrunch, Wired, and Very British Problems, and they are most active on Wednesdays between 6 and 11. They also prefer mobile browsing, which is quite obvious, seeing that Monzo is quite a fintech, innovative company. They also skew towards neurotic, as you can see there. We can also get an idea of what interests them and moves them emotionally, which media types do they engage with, and which topics are trending among a certain community. So all of this info can be redirected then into your content marketing efforts to make your collateral more relevant to the people that actually propel your business. We can also take it one step further and look at actual behavior, from device type to behavioral content patterns. We can also see the likelihood of an audience to engage with content based on the amplification metric. All of this helps brands color in the picture of their ideal customer. And then ultimately, we can also find the answer to the very important question, what drives them? Using IBM Watson's Big 5 personality characteristics, which represent the most widely used model for describing how a person engages with the world. So to round up this presentation, I wanted to kind of bring in a couple of case studies to show good use of social listening combined with audience insights. Here we have Madame Tussauds Hong Kong and their mission to attract a younger audience by leveraging one of the top influencers, Jackson Wang, of that specific Generation Z audience segment. So the announcement of his wax figurine actually generated a considerable hype online with more than 23,000 mentions. So this is a very classic use case, but still very impressive. As a second example, the well-known shoe brand Tom, they listened in on social and analyzed their audience and came across something quite curious, actually. They found that a large majority of the audiences were actually interested in My Little Pony. So putting insights into action, they created a limited edition shoe in collaboration with Hasbro, which helped them generate significant sales. They were sold out within 48 hours of launch. So here it was a valuable partnership opportunity that was brought to life due to audience intelligence. So this is more of a local South African example. It's a prominent SA media group called Primedia. They've benefited from audience data quite significantly. The insights and the sales teams work together to create tailor-made and bespoke campaigns that generate much higher return on investment and positively grow their online fan bases as a result of this newly found targeted and personalized approach. To end off, the likes of social data, online comments, review sites, blogs, microblogs, forums, these all serve as a treasure trove of customer data. And if you are able to tap into that with the right technology and the right tools, you will always be one step ahead of your competitors. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chelsea. It's actually very interesting, I often am asked about sort of Facebook and now I suppose WhatsApp as well. People are always concerned that they're being listened to. And the fact of the matter is you do want to be listened to because you don't want to have adverts coming your way that are not for you. So looking at it from the business side of things is really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think Randy touched on it also in his presentation, the compliance, conversation when we talk about data, especially public data, social media data. We can speak about that for hours and hours, but it is controversial and it's interesting, right? There's a lot of restrictions and API restrictions when it comes to, what third-party providers can track from a public data perspective and how they use that data. But, when we look historically at, for example, like a Cambridge Analytica, and how data was public and private data was misused in a political setting, it becomes a very, very interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's for another day.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
No problem.
So we are going to move on to Kevin Derman now, the Chief Executive Officer at Cascade.cloud. So he is a technology and human potential evangelist, and his favorite topic being the potential when these two forces are combined. So Kevin's going to chat to us about the democratization of AI. Over to you, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. And let's just see that you can see my slides at the same time. Yes. There you go. Claire, can you see the slides? Is that fine? Oh, okay, we've got thumbs up there. So great to be with you all today and sharing my thoughts around the democratization of artificial intelligence. So before we get set in with that, tell you a small bit about Cascade and what we do. Essentially, to put it in a one sentence, we solve business problems using the hyperscale cloud. What is hyperscale cloud? It's the mega cloud providers, public cloud providers like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft, Google, etc. And what do? We migrate you to the cloud, move companies into the cloud, manage the environment for them, architect it for them, align them to best practices and policy-based governance for their cloud consumption. We bring their costs down as well, and then we develop cloud-native applications for them as well, doing custom integrations. And our favorite, which is working with advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, the topic of today's talk. So democratization of artificial intelligence, what does it mean? Well, we have heard so much about democratization over the past couple of years, and this guy who's on the screen is to blame for it, but really democratization is this idea that you have access to things. Everybody gets access to the opportunities and benefits of particular technology. In this case, we're speaking about AI and artificial intelligence. And many times people have spoken about AI and they consider it to be the domain of only these large mega companies. So you think about all of the enterprise companies in South Africa that have embraced it, the likes of Discovery, the likes of the banks when they're doing fraud detection. But democratization of it really means that it is not only available for the domains of these large companies, but small companies as well. And when I mean small companies, I'm not speaking about smaller enterprises. I'm not even speaking about SMEs and corporate kind of customers. I'm talking about even if you've got one person in a business, they can utilize AI. And they can utilize AI to their benefit, to be able to handle business as if they were one of these large companies. So how do you democratize this technology? Well, here's some points around this. And the first one I want to speak about is idea sharing. When you have an idea and you want to share that particular idea, in today's environment with social media, we have fantastic ways of actually getting this idea out there. So this is one of the reasons, and we saw in that slide that Randy showed about Pokemon Go being able to scale to 50 million users in such a short period of time. And it's not only because of the technology that's out there in terms of running the software itself and the servers that could run that software, but it's also on the idea and the ability to share that idea. So through the social media platforms that we have of Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, etc., we can share ideas today far quicker than we ever have been able to in the past. And this allows us to democratize technology in a way. When somebody has a brilliant idea and says, wow, I used this software today and it was phenomenal, that somebody else who listened to that social media post can go and say, well, let me try it and let me understand how this worked. And then they would spread that idea on as well. Accessibility is the next thing. Accessibility through the internet. More and more people have the ability to actually utilize the internet, and this gives them the opportunity to utilize these technologies. Many of these technologies are open source, and so the cost is incredibly low in utilizing those, often only having to pay for support in those. And then lastly, the ability to learn about these technologies. And again, we have the internet to to thank there. Many people have utilized these learning resources online during COVID and have picked up new skills that are involved in this area. So we have these 5 areas that are to play and get the information about the technology out there as well. So how do we democratize AI infrastructure? Because this is infrastructure for artificial intelligence. So how do we democratize it? Well, you see here in the slide somebody looking at some of their figures of what's happening in their server cabinets over there. And this is really a concept to us that is most foreign, because why anybody would want to go and look at what's happening in their servers, I don't understand, because cloud technology makes it that we don't have to look after that type of technology. We don't have to go in and manage it to that kind of level because of the hyperscalers that are involved. So when you think about AI infrastructure, do you think about, all right, I need to go and buy a server? Because many companies and many people are still in that mindset of, I want to own my architecture. I want to know that I have a room in the back where I can lock the key and I know that it's safe and sound inside there. And when they do this cost-benefit analysis of, do I run a workload in the cloud or do I buy my own servers, often they just look at the costs that are involved in this environment. And the costs they think of as the server cost. What does a server cost me in the cloud? And what does a server cost me if I'm going to have this in a back room? And really, they are quite different. And I want to drill down into why they are quite different. So cloud has a lower total cost of ownership. And I'm sure many of you have heard about this concept of cost of ownership and the total cost of ownership. So you can see that the cloud has this element of cost at the top that you're seeing from a subscription fee, which is typically pay as you go. And on-premise, people are used to either the software licensing or I'm going to have my hardware costs as well. But look at all of the stuff that's involved underneath that iceberg. You're looking at the customization, implementation and training, hardware costs, IT personnel costs, the maintenance of it, the upgrades, and then the ongoing costs in the realm of applying patches, upgrades. What happens if the system goes down? So if you're in the cloud, as an example, and the system goes down, you could reboot the server, or you could have automatic failover so it wouldn't be happening in that environment. But you can be having 5 nines of availability in that particular environment. Performance tuning, rewriting customizations and integrations, upgrading dependent applications, the ongoing burden of this IT hardware. And why anybody would want all of these things, I don't know. All of this can be provided by the cloud and can be taken care of by the people who are looking after that cloud environment, like a Microsoft Azure, like an AWS or Google, etc. So there are many different options that are out there. I want to take it one step further, and that is, in the cloud, you also have options. So here we have a move from server to serverless. In the pre-cloud, bring your own server era, you would buy the servers, you would have your own server room, or you would have your own data center where you would house all of these servers. And then there was a move to infrastructure as a service. So people said, I didn't want to take care of the infrastructure. I don't want to worry about cooling and the security of where those are locked away. I want to know that I'm dealing with the best that we have in that particular environment. And then I'm going to put my operating systems and business applications on top of it. Then we moved from infrastructure as a service to platform, where it said, I don't want to worry about patching the operating system. I don't want to worry about the next layer of software as well, the databases, for example. And then we finally moved to serverless. Now, serverless is quite a misnomer of a word, because there certainly are servers involved in serverless. But you don't have to worry about those particular servers. You are only worried about what is the business function that you want to achieve through this particular process. And the server layer and the software that's running that particular server, you want to actually not be concerned about that at all. And that's what serverless gives to you. There's the old example of pizza as a service. And if you take the analogy from the pizza as a service, you're moving away from having to go and get the flour, you put in the water, mixing the dough yourself, putting on the cheese, putting on the tomato, getting an oven, putting it into the oven. You're getting away from all of that and the actual physical involvement of it to what I want to eat a pizza. I want to have that experience. And you're moving towards that, which is the actual business function itself. So here is a comparison where we look at focusing on the business logic and more focusing on the business logic and the stack abstraction as we go up this. So from physical machines, it's something, if you want to order a server, or if you've done that recently, you know it's not a quick thing where you can go and just pick up a server in half an hour and the server's delivered and you've installed it, etc. You deploy it in a matter of months. And the unit of scale that you're buying these in is in physical servers, and they will typically live for years with you. Moving up to virtual machines or instances in the cloud as well, your unit of scale is that machine, that virtual machine. You can deploy them in minutes. They can live for as long as you want, but you can have them available for a week and then down them, take them down, etc. You could have them go on and off, daytime be on, nighttime be off. And then containerization is taking it one step further over there. And you can deploy your containers in seconds. They can be alive for minutes or hours, etc. And then when you do that final move to serverless, you go to a unit of scale, which is in functions. So the function is what is the business application that you are wanting to do. And you can deploy these in milliseconds and they live for seconds. You are just going to execute that particular function. I'm going to speak about what some of these functions look like and what they can be in just a moment. So here's the example that I want to step you through. Any shop that you walk into nowadays will have a CCTV camera over there. Now, let's say we're the owner of this particular store, and I want to know that anytime somebody walks into my store with a weapon, whether they've got a knife in their hand, whether they go behind a counter and they pull out a gun, I want that to be identified. So here is the solution. It's an artificial intelligence solution that we're wanting to create. The artificial intelligence solution is going to need to be able to identify a weapon, whether it's a knife, whether it's a bat of some sort, or whether it is a gun. So you want to be able to identify these. So I'm going to show you what this looks like without any servers being utilized. So here you have your IP camera, and your IP camera in the store is going to a video capture client. It samples a frame off the live video stream. It packages it and sends it. And in this particular instance, I have utilized Amazon Web Services framework over here, and Amazon Web Services in terms of putting all of this together. So when I speak about the serverless functions, I'm going to mention Lambda. Lambda is Amazon Web Services serverless functions. What happens is that video stream moves through. It triggers a serverless function. It says, I have some video information that's come through. Fetch a frame. And Lambda goes and captures this frame, and it sends that frame to something called Amazon Rekognition. And recognition is the ability to actually understand and detect objects that are in that frame. And we have trained the system now to be able to pick up weapons, any kind of weapon, it would be able to pick it up. And immediately what happens is, as it sees there's a gun in this particular example, it sends an SMS alert based on the object watch list via Amazon SNS, which is yet another microservice that runs serverlessly, to my mobile phone to say, warning, there's somebody in the store that has a weapon, and I'm now aware of it. At the same time, I'm going to store all of these video images over here. I'm going to create the metadata around it. What is the demographic of the people that came into my store, so that I can actually utilize it for marketing purposes at a later stage. And I can utilize and access all of that data via a web user interface as well. So you will see in this example over here, there are no servers. There's no hardware that I've actually had to buy and own. All that I'm doing is I'm executing on these commands as and when I need to utilize them. And so it has brought the price down of this particular solution down from an exorbitant price of actually owning the hardware, maintaining it, looking after it, to actually just getting to the functions of this. Now, this kind of technology exists on many of the hyperscalers that are out there as well. So I'm going to now speak about some of the more of the abstracted layers of artificial intelligence that these companies utilize in order to democratize and make available artificial intelligence. So the first is these AI services. Easily add intelligence to your applications, where you can do things like content detection, understanding what is the tone of content, understanding what is the tone of tweets or any conversation that's out there. We can do things like voice-enabled applications as well. And then you go to the machine learning services, where you can build, train, and deploy machine learning very, very fast on these particular platforms as well. So in this case, I still want to know what the infrastructure is. I want to know what kind of server I'm running my machine learning on. If I want to do that, I can do that, but I can up and down that server for as long as I want, a day, a week, a month, etc., and then shut it down. I can utilize frameworks. So I'm utilizing AI frameworks. I can utilize those over there. And I can even go and say, look, I don't want any platform on these. I want to configure them myself. So I just want to buy the compute. All of these come with analytics and security built on it. And of course, the learning tools as well. The ready AI services are things like Amazon Lex, Amazon Rekognition for photo recognition, Translate for translating of text, Comprehend, discovering insights and relationships in text, Poly for natural sounding text to speech, and Transcribe for transcribing voice to text. But as I showed you in all of these, it's not that simple of just going and getting one of these services and I can use it. There is a lot of technology that is behind it over here, and you need to know how to configure this technology. You need to know how to work the business processes in order to get the outcome. Another use case I want to speak about is AI recommendation engines. A couple of the presenters have mentioned how everybody is running to e-commerce in today's environment, because that's where we are doing most of our sales. So here I'm speaking about Amazon's Personalize. Now, Amazon Personalize is the recommendation engine that if you've ever bought off Amazon.com, once you get to checkout, it says people who bought this product also bought that. They bought these, or would you like to add this with your purchase? And 35% of all Amazon's transactions come from the algorithm that does these product recommendations. So can you imagine being able to turn on recommendations and suddenly you have got a turnover increase of 35% in your business? Who would not want to be able to do that? And you have access to the same recommendation engine that Amazon uses as well. And again, you need to be able to put it together. You need to be able to build up the solution. And that's why people come to companies like Cascade in order to do that for them. Domino's Pizza has been a great user of this overseas. They've even been able to add geolocation to it, so that if you're driving through a neighborhood and you're a Domino's Pizza client, it can tell you, wow, you've got a Domino's store that is a kilometer from here, and your favorite pizza is on special today. And they could recommend adding additional toppings that they think you might like based on what you've bought in the past. So how does it do this? Delivers high quality recommendations. It's in real time. You can easily implement personalized recommendations in days, not months, in terms of the learning algorithm for this, provided obviously that you've got the data. You have an opportunity to personalize every touch point along the customer journey. Don't only think about personalization under these situations as the final transaction. And a great example here is what Netflix is currently doing. So if you're a Netflix viewer, you would have experienced that not only is Netflix making recommendations to you based on what you liked from other shows, but they're actually tailoring what is the thumbnail of that particular movie that you would like. So it's changing it. The thumbnail that you're going to see for your movie and the thumbnail I see are completely different, based on our preferences and based on our actions of what we've done in the past. If we ask to see a picture of a trailer, for example, the trailer that we see is personalized to us. It's showing us elements of that movie that, based on what we've watched previously, we would like over here. So it is leading us to a more and more consumption-based activity. Now, you might be upset about that. You might think, well, this is manipulation. Well, is it manipulation? I personally would like to see things that I would like to see. I think Chelsea made that comment about us wanting to see ads that are personalized to us. We'd rather have that than ads that aren't. So although we might feel it infringes on our privacy, actually it is better for us to be able to see that. So again, here's this AI recommendation engine, and although it is a serverless component that we can utilize, there is a lot of configuration that needs to go into this particular use case. What can we use it for? E-commerce, upselling, repeat orders, understanding and knowing your customer. We can use it for stock forecasting as well, and really customer targeting. If you want to know what are the costs that are involved over here, this is what you're looking at. And I'm not talking about building the actual solution. You need to build that particular solution. But from a data ingestion, you're looking at 5 US cents per gig of the data that you're taking in. Training the actual models is 24 US cents per hour of training. And then you have a transaction per second, hour per month that goes through, and you're paying a different rate at that. So to give you an example over here, this is a media company. They power content discovery and recommendation through real-time profiling of their users' preference and consumption behavior. So many of the news sites will do this. They upload 200 gigs of data in a month. They train a single solution once per day with it, taking 20 minutes to complete, consuming 10 training hours of training. And further, the customer uses inference capacity of 10 transactions per second. So in other words, they're making 10 inferences per second for 720 hours for the month. And that whole solution is costing $1,552. That is what that amazing solution is going to cost. So if that isn't democratization of artificial intelligence, I don't know what is, because you could not start building a solution on premise with your own servers, etc., with that kind of cost. So it really is an amazing opportunity for companies to take advantage of. It's an amazing opportunity for companies to do proof of concepts, to try out things, to see what is going to work. And that's what I would encourage everybody to do. So recommendations, forecasting is another one. We've spoken about the image analysis. In forecasting, you can look at things on doing product demand planning, resource planning, looking at what is your revenue predicting your revenue, your expenses, and your cash flow as well. Of course, COVID has come in and has put a spanner in the works with our artificial intelligence forecasting, because we've gone through an unprecedented time. So will it go back like this? And will we be able to utilize the data? I think we will have to do some correction factors in order to get that data in line as well. So recommendations, forecasting, we've spoken about that as well. Recognition in terms of video and image recognition for busy reception areas during time and attendance. It's also a great solution now with to have contactless reception areas and contactless time and attendance systems, so you don't have to go and do fingerprints. And we've designed several of these solutions at Cascade, which are available for customers to consume. And again, they're almost a pay-as-you-go type nature because of the serverless nature of them. And then lastly, I'm just going to speak about chatbots, because this is a fantastic opportunity, which is really AI democratization, is the utilization of chatbot services, the ability to allow your company to be available 24/7 to your customers that are out there, whether it's from a service perspective, whether it's product information, or whether it's actually conducting a sale. Chatbots can do this for you as well. And I just want to give you a demo. So we've done chatbots on various platforms ranging from Facebook Messenger to WhatsApp chatbots to website application chatbots, etc. And the type of solution that you can get can also be voice as well. And this would be a typical, I'm giving you an example here, of a conversation that I would have with a chatbot, where I can speak to that chatbot and find out.
Hello, welcome to the Yellow Pages. How may we help you today?
I'm looking for a plumber. I think there's a slight latency on my line.
In what city do you need to rent a car?
Okay, let's just try that one again.
Hello, welcome to the Yellow Pages. How may we help you today?
I need a plumber.
In what suburb?
Rosebank.
Okay, we have 26 plumbers that service the Rosebank area. Would you like me to provide you with the top-rated one's details?
Yes.
Thank you. The top-rated plumber at 5 stars in the Rosebank area is Leaky Fix Plumbers. Their number is 555-2789. Call again soon.
Okay, so there's a great example of speaking to a chatbot, getting the information I need. Sometimes our mobiles are not as reliable as we would like them to be in terms of latency and speaking, but you see how it works. And now I would far rather be chatting with via WhatsApp, for example. It's my most common platform that I'm on. I'm using it as a business tool. So if I need to find something, rather WhatsApp that number, speak to a chatbot. I don't need to speak to a human. I can go through that. I can get the answer exactly as I want. And this is true democratization of AI. This is available to companies large, to companies small. And we have so many opportunities with that. And before I close, I'm going to let Alexa. So if you've ever spoken to Alexa, you'll know Alexa can do many things. We've built some Alexa skills, and this is one particular one. Alexa, open Cascade Update.
Here's your update. Get the benefits of cloud. Cost savings, agility, elasticity, and redundancy. Get the benefit of Cascade.
And lastly, Alexa, won't you sing us a technology song?
Sorry, I don't know that, but I do have a skill you might like.
She does know that. I've got the demigods against me. Alexa, sing a technology song.
Technology, technology. Where would I be without technology? Without the Wi-Fi, I couldn't say hi. As for music, I couldn't choose it. Shopping lists would cease to exist, and time would be on your wrist. I thank my lucky stars that I'm here today. I hope that you'll agree. Give me 1, 2, 3 shouts aloud for technology. Ooh, technology.
And sometimes just like that, it works for us. Thank you, everybody, and I look forward to chatting to you just now.
Oh, Kevin, that's going to be going around my head now. So thank you very much for that. The interesting thing, I just did a little story on chatbots. So I'm really interested because the struggle with having 11 languages in this country, that's sort of what we were trying to get at. So, can you talk about that as well? Because from the people that I'd spoken to, they were all really positive about it and that it is implemented. And in this country, we're doing everything we can to help people as much as we can.
Yes, so there definitely is a language issue, but I have no doubt that many of the companies will develop more and more of the 11 languages in order to get them speaking fluently. So at the moment, the most common ones are in English, and all of the global providers do this in English, but you can train them in different languages as well. It's not a simple process. You really need to have a very big dictionary in order to be able to bring it in.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay. So I think Lavina is still having problems with her connection. So I think we're going to move on to the panel discussion, if that's okay. But before we do that, there was a question here for Chelsea. I don't know if she's still here. With regards to Prime Media. So in as far as media insights, besides Prime Media Broadcasting, who else in the audio space are you working with, was the question.
Good question. We have NDAs with clients, so I'm not really allowed to share exact brand names and companies, but we do work with a number of broadcasting and media groups, not just locally but globally as well. BBC is one of them that we don't have an NDA with, that we can quite openly share. But yeah, so we work with a number. It's just difficult for me to give exact brand names, but it's interesting how I guess the different media kind of groups or broadcasting companies actually use data in different ways, and I think it actually. It differs per market, to be honest. Like a BBC, for example, will use our data primarily for research purposes, and looking into consumer perception, sentiment, that sort of thing around some of their shows and broadcasting stations. So it completely depends. But yeah, we work with a number all over the world.
Because you were talking a lot about blind advertising as well. And I think, what you do is super interesting, because I suppose radio stations, just specifically on that topic, are competing with the whole podcasting thing, which is just blown out of, it's just gone absolutely haywire for the last year. So, I think it's different in the UK maybe because people are actually sitting in their cars listening to the radio, whereas, well, maybe not at the moment. But for a while, the South Africans don't spend they spend enough time in their car, but you get, you listen to the morning show and the afternoon show, and that's really it, whereas now they're competing against podcasts. So
yeah, Claire, completely agree. I mean, the kind of the boom of the streaming industry, as we call it, or podcasting, has really kind of changed the environment from a broadcasting perspective, and it's forced radio to really innovate. So what we see with Prime Media, for example, but a lot of other local stations, they're actually looking at how they can reach their consumers in different domains. And their audiences. So streaming is obviously, kind of a new channel and an innovative one for that as well. And it's really interesting when we actually look at the different demographics of audiences and consumers that are active on these different channels. Like radio is more of a legacy channel. So we see an older generation engaging with radio and broadcasting. But, the younger generation, we talk about millennials or Gen Z, they're very active on podcasting and live streaming platforms. So it's interesting when you look at the demographic breakdown as well.
Super. Okay. We're going to move on to our panel, and we are joined by Dr. Makaziwe Makambo, who is the 4IR research expert at the DCDT. So she's going to join Randy and Kevin, and Chelsea, if you want to join in, you are more than welcome to. One of the first questions that actually came up while Randy was talking was, would you advise that organizations move all their data to the cloud, or a combination of on-prem or cloud data, considering highly regulated industries such as healthcare and financial services, which often have sensitive data at their disposal? And what about those security concerns?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's one that we get frequently. The short answer is no. You probably shouldn't. I mean, there are certainly,
brilliant.
well, there are certainly cases where, and you know, Kevin, I think, did a great job of articulating the real value of exploiting public cloud services for scale and cost and ease of management and time to value. There are, however, still very real, you know, data sovereignty and data security issues that are highly industry dependent in many cases, and healthcare and finance are the two obvious ones that we speak about a lot, where having that data on premises is, in some cases, actually legally mandated. And even if it's not legally mandated, it simply becomes much easier to maintain that chain of custody and that control and that sovereignty if it is on-prem. The other element of that whole, you know, where does my data reside and what's the best platform or the ideal platform has to do as well with cost. Yes. So whereas you can persist some amount of your data in a cloud or one or more public clouds, and obviously do so in a pretty straightforward way, the cost of doing that, when you look at the incremental cost model, and again, Kevin showed a couple examples of this, it looks incredibly attractive. And in fact, generally speaking, if it's properly deployed, it's a great cost model. It's easy to, you know, sustain. It's very cost effective. The cost starts to become prohibitive, though, when the data volumes really increase and you start doing a lot of data movement. So staging data to the cloud is typically an incremental operation where you're, you know, putting a little more and a little more and a little more. When your data volumes start to increase dramatically, the egress and ingress costs start to become prohibitive pretty quickly. So there are lots of examples of clients, and it tends to be larger organizations or, you know, agencies within the government, for example, where the data volume quickly becomes a prohibitor or an inhibitor of broader cloud adoption, because the cost associated with moving those volumes of data back and forth add up very quickly. So now you start getting into more of a, you know, proximal compute model, where instead of pushing data around, you're actually moving code to where the data lives, as opposed to staging the data where the code lives, which is why the emphasis on serverless is also becoming very prominent, and edge computing is driving a lot of that as well. So it's a really good question. There is no easy answer, but I would say, generally speaking, don't assume that you can just push all of your data into the cloud and be done with managing on-premises data. So long answer, but.
And Kevin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, well, I'm a cloud guy, so I typically lead with the answer is cloud. What's the question? But putting aside all regulations and data sovereignty rules, generally things are easier for you in the cloud. And certainly to Randy's point, yes, if you've got massive amounts of data and you have a need to move it from here to there continuously, you're going to be paying for that. But you need to architect your solution in such a way that you can do it in a way that is most cost affordable. And also, if you've got large amounts of data that you're not using, it's really important to actually understand that data of what is there, so that you can archive it and put stuff in deep archive, you know, really depending on how quickly you need to be able to access that data when you do need to access it. So there's different ways of doing it. Sure. Really, depending on company size, if you're an SME or you're a corporate client, your life is easier in the cloud. You are able to do so much more, and you're able to really create a competitive advantage for your business through the ease of doing innovative solutions.
And then another question following on to that is, how do we take advantage of AI where there's such an uneven wealth gap and inequality amongst the businesses?
I would really suggest that any company, whether you're a startup, and we've worked with many startups where we've done solutions utilizing image recognition and being able to solve problems in pest control, for example, and identifying pests. And those type of things, the companies had no money to start. They could only start actually innovating and doing POCs, etc. So you can do that in the cloud. Many of the top providers, IBM and the AWS and Microsoft, etc., have programs that allow companies to get a whole host of credits for free that they can actually start innovating. So anybody... Yeah, go ahead, Randy.
Sorry, I was just going to add there's also a lot of great public-private partnerships in this space as well. So IBM, for instance, has a huge outreach program where we work with communities and governmental agencies to make some of these services available. And here, correct, the cloud is the perfect distribution model for this because it scales very efficiently and it's very economically, sustainable. So it is more challenging. I mean, there are certainly those gaps make acquisition and utilization of the technology a little more challenging. The good news is that as the technology continues to evolve and adapt, the costs keep coming down, right? So the ability to apply this sophisticated, AI and machine learning service to information streams is becoming a lot less expensive and a lot more, to use Kevin's term, democratized. So that's one of the ways that we're helping to bridge that gap. And really, I think it's a pretty powerful and really interesting way that we can level the playing field a bit, because you've got, situations now where across huge, swaths of the population worldwide, access to these kind of services are now, available on your phone. You no longer have to be an AWS subscriber. You don't have to work for a company that provides those services. You can go on your phone. Your phone has geotagging and spatial awareness, and it can deliver, health alerts and community health alerts and public health alerts in real time for an extremely low cost. So, technology is a great way to bridge that gap.
Right. And Dr. M, I see you nodding.
Good afternoon, Claire, and thank you so much for having me in such an imperative.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. With the question that you have asked in the my question, my answer would be more on it's not really an easy question and also an easy answer to that case, because having your data in the cloud makes life easier, makes life more accessible, make it more seamless. And for example, look at the example where you are at the healthcare sector, and now you are sick, you are in South Africa, and then you go in Europe. And then you get sick. And then now for you to get the medical record, the doctor in Europe have to call the doctor in South Africa in order to help you out. But in the essence, where everything is stored in the cloud, it will be much more easier. However, the downside of it is the security aspect, as my colleagues already in the panel have mentioned that. The security measures is very important, that whenever you're developing an AI application, especially in these emerging technologies, you need to make sure that your security aspects are well intact, they are well in order, because people most of the time, they think that AI and these technologies, they go alone. However, these technologies, they go hand in hand with the cybersecurity, because data protection is the core. Now, nowadays, you can't use anything without a data, and you need to make sure that data is protected. So it's not really an easy question and also not an easy answer to that. So a person needs, especially the companies, to develop solutions and also to check what are the solutions to that, and also the security measures for that solution. And then in that case, life would be much more easy.
Okay, great.
Great.
So with regards to AI development and implementation, where would any organization begin with their AI journey? Like the finance, HR, marketing,
Okay. Claire, in there, it depends what makes the particular organization productive and effective. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of an answer, because some of the organization, it's more important in the marketing, some is more important in the finance, while others, it's more in the HR. So you need to check in the organization, what are the return on investment whenever you're developing a solution, and also you check, is this application that I'm developing or I'm buying, is it going to be making more the company productive? Is it going to be making making my company more effective. And then in that case, you can prioritize what is important. Where can you start? Which section of your company can you really begin? And then you start implementing the AI solution in there.
Because I think for a lot of people, it could be quite, or a lot of businesses, it could be small business, especially medium even, it could be quite daunting to think about, I've got to move all of my information, or I've got to do all of this, you know, where do I start kind of thing. So I think it would be, it is daunting.
That's why it's very important to prioritize whenever you are developing the solution, and whenever you are buying the solutions, you need to prioritize which section is more important, and then you grow and increase as you go along, and then you go to the other sections that are making your company more effective and more productive. And then also it's important to check your return on investment when you are also developing the solution and buying these AI-driven solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Claire, if I can just add to Dr. M's comment on that. I think many companies are kind of feeling that, oh, well, we better do something in artificial intelligence. We better have a solution and go there. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. And they start with, all right, what can we do in AI? Instead of starting with the business question first, that's what you should be doing. You should start with the business question. What do you need to answer? Because once you've defined the business question, you might find that actually you don't need an artificial intelligence solution. It's a simple workflow that you're trying to create that's going to help your business. Or it could be an application that you can code. You can hard code for it. It doesn't need to go through a learning process, because actually intuitively, you know what the answer is. You just need it to happen on its own.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would just kind of amplify that. You know, you always want to start with the question as opposed to start with the answer and work backwards, or you end up, you know, doing what. So I deal with a lot of executives and do a lot of, you know, keynote discussions and deal with a lot of our clients around the world. And there's this phenomenon that I call airline management by airline magazine. So the boss, you know, takes a flight and pulls out the airline magazine in the seat pocket, starts reading about how some company is doing some really interesting things with, you know your customer initiatives and targeted marketing and market of one kind of initiatives, and comes back into the office all excited and, you know, sends the troops out to go figure out how to do this. Like, we need to do this because everybody else is doing it. So that creates this, you know, groundswell of interest. So I think one of the things I advise people in a lot of cases is, and it's been said already, start small, you know, start with a business problem or an opportunity. You know, during the past year with the global pandemic, there have been a lot of, for better, for worse, kind of opportunities that have presented themselves, whether it's enhanced online presence, whether it's, you know, using chatbots to scale your ability to communicate, whether it's providing targeted public health alerts. I mean, there's a million different examples that have been driven by this, the prevailing conditions. And the good thing from a starting point is that you don't have to make a multi-million-dollar capital investment to get started. You can use some of the cloud services that Kevin mentioned for a very modest investment. You can start, you can generate value. You can start taking advantage of these, you know, pro forma models that are perhaps already available. You can leverage open source, which is free. There's lots of open source initiatives and frameworks available, and then scale it as you go. And it may make sense at some point to bring a portion of it on-prem or to have a more structured deployment methodology. But the technology is now making itself much easier to start small and grow as your business requirements change. So.
Right. I had another question here of giving an example of taking AI into fine dining. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah. That's one of the very kind of fringe, a little bit still fringe boutique-y kind of things. But for example, if I and fine dining, of course, also has become redefined in the past year. So I'm kind of a foodie. For example, I like to cook and I like to experiment with different stuff. I'm a rabid consumer of weird YouTube videos about food and cooking and different cuisines, and I travel a lot too, or at least I used to travel a lot when travel was a thing. So I like to cook lots of different cultural, you know, kinds of foods and experiment with things. So I'm on YouTube all the time looking for, you know, interesting things. YouTube brilliantly has adapted my weird culinary habits into building playlists for me and presenting me with videos that, 100 people on earth are probably watching, but I'm utterly fascinated by. Yeah. So that's one simple example where, I want to make something really specific and really interesting that has this flavor profile and uses these ingredients and, it speaks to this mood or whatever. There's 5 videos on how to make that thing, which I didn't even know existed before I went in. So there's a million examples like that. Restaurants are using it more for tailoring their menus. You can have essentially, if you're a frequent diner at a restaurant, they know who you are. They will design an individual targeted prefix menu just for you based on what's available, current ingredients, locally sourced things that they know are of interest to you. So lots of examples.
And I know a few years ago, we did a thing with IBM where Watson came up with its own menu, and a chef had to prepare it. So what happened was the chef, Michelin star and all that kind of thing, but he was so confused about the ingredients and how things would be put together, but then so impressed at what the actual result was. So there's another great example of a machine showing you what you can and can't what you could put together, and maybe challenging our traditional thinking as well.
And AI is playing a big part in as Randy said, in the menu engineering. There's a guy in New York called Greg Rapp, and he is a menu engineer, and he used to do it intuitively, but now utilizes a lot of tools around this, where he goes and consults for a restaurant and will tell them, this is what you've got to price these meals at, this is where you have to put these particular items in the menu. And very sadly, we all fall prey to restaurants that do this. A common one is the wine list and how they portray their wines, and they'll put a very expensive bottle of wine. Say you're looking for a Cab Sauv, and you've got an expensive Cab Sauv over there, and you're entertaining people. So you're choosing the wine, and you look through the list, and you go, well, I'm not going to choose the most expensive, but I'm not going to be cheap and choose the bottom. So I'm going to go like the second or the third down, and that is where the restaurant makes most of their margin, and they are analyzing these things and being told exactly where to place the items on their menu to maximize profit.
And this I suspect falls right into Chelsea's kind of wheelhouse, because this is very much buyer behavior and audience analysis to determine
Yeah, I don't know if Chelsea wants to. I don't know if you want to comment.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's quite interesting with the restaurant industry in particular is obviously social media is so prominent when it comes to restaurants, any kind of food and beverage service. It's very consumer facing. So, how a lot of our clients in this industry use AI is through smart alerts, actually. And they link smart alerts to customer complaints. A really good example of a client that does this is, fast food. So what they'll do is they'll actually set up social media AI alerts on specific products. Let's say it's the Whopper Burger, or let's say it's the Big Mac, if that's your competitor, for example. And then what they'll do is they'll set up, the executive team or the product marketing team will actually set up AI-based alerts on when there's customer complaints or perhaps positive sentiment, social media around a particular product. But it's actually based on thresholds. So I'm sure you can imagine how much content comes through around, the Whopper on social media or the Big Mac globally, specifically. But what they actually do quite smartly is they will monitor when there's a change in momentum from a social media perspective. So let's say there's, 1,000 posts within the space of a minute in a particular geo area around the Whopper Burger. The executive team will then get alerted in real time on their mobile apps that there's momentum in that particular market around negative sentiment social media linked to that particular product. And so, it becomes very interesting when we look at how clients are using these AI-based smart alerts, not only to monitor, products and offerings from a food and beverage perspective, perspective, but also monitoring their competitors and looking at particular trends as well. So one of the biggest trends, sticking on the topic with restaurants and food and beverage, is the use of plastic containers or plastic packaging. Obviously sustainability and pro-environment and being more green from an environmental perspective is very, very big at the moment. And so what a lot of these restaurant and food brands are doing is tracking consumer sentiment on social media around their packaging, and looking at the changes in dynamic around that, the conversations, where it's happening the most, in which markets, and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting when we look at all the different macro factors that impact businesses from a restaurant perspective and food and beverage. Very, very interesting.
Right. That is interesting.
Yeah.
So the problem is, though, like we were talking earlier, people think it's manipulative, but actually we're just trying to give you what you want.
Yeah, definitely. There's a fine line, I think, between the use of data and how companies use data. I think we've talked about it a lot. I think the personalization is important because consumers. Let's use retail, online shopping as an example, right? Like, I think consumers, especially the younger generations, are actually pro getting personalized, customized, marketing ads and tailored ways of shopping on online e-commerce platforms. I think the problem comes in when, it's unsolicited marketing. And I think, it is a fine line, right? So it's, as I said, like, we can talk about this for ages. But yeah, it comes down to, the companies and the brands themselves, and making sure that how they speak to their audiences is how the audiences want to be spoken to.
Yes.
And that's where audience data becomes so important as well, because we can see where audiences are most active in terms of which media channels they prefer, at what times, what type of content they resonate or engage with the most. Are there particular industry topics that they are most interested in? So this is the kinds, these are the kinds of insights that, these consumer-facing brands and organizations can use to be better with their audiences from an engagement perspective, because the audiences are then getting content in the way and in the channels that they want it the most. So it becomes a lot more prominent, and obviously the ROI on that from an engagement perspective is much more prominent as well.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. How do you effectively compare technology solution providers and sort of separate hype from reality? I don't know who wants to answer that. Kevin? Smiling.
I was imagining Randy mulling it through his mind there, and how does he do this objectively working for IBM? How do you compare technology providers? Again, you go with a couple things. What do you want to achieve? So that's your first thing. So almost starting with the business problem again. You want to make sure that whatever technology provider you're going with is going to be able to solve your problem. The second thing is the skills that you have. Where is your competency lie? What company are you going to engage in order to do your solution? Do you have access to companies or to people that have those skills with that particular vendor? And then vendor support, I think, is a very important thing. So any company dealing with any vendor, are they in country? Do they have a lot of technical assistance if you need it? Is the vendor open to assisting you and to helping you, etc.? So really what I would do is I would design a list of 5 criteria that are most important to you, and go for cost, go for availability, go for skills, all of those things that I've just spoken about, and then score who you're actually considering utilizing.
Pros and cons
with a solution. However, I do find that many of our customers actually don't really care about the technology layer. All that they care about is the outcome. of this. So if they are wanting a particular solution, and let's go back to the solution of identifying somebody walking into a shop with a weapon. If they are wanting that solution, they don't care what's the underlying infrastructure on it, as long as the solution works. As long as it's identifying the weapons quickly and they're getting their answer and they're able to respond, that is key. So again, it comes down to solving the business problem. Can it solve the business problem? Is it going to do it effectively and cost effectively?
Perfect.
Yeah.
And then I've got one time. Oh, sorry, Randy, you want to go?
No. Just I would just add to that you know, develop your list of requirements is important. Start with a business problem. Don't just jump on an interesting technology because it's the new shiny object, and you know, kick the tires. If there's an opportunity to do a pilot or a trial of some kind, do that. See if it fits your needs, and then kind of go from there. So
yeah, perfect. Proof of concept is always a good idea, isn't it?
Yeah, I think also just to jump in there, I think there's a lot of incredible third-party platforms that you can actually do a lot of desktop research on if you are a buyer in the technology marketplace. Platforms like G2 Crowd, other review sites as well, give you know, customers a really good platform to do research on you know, these various technology vendors. You know, G2 Crowd, for example, is it's an incredible platform that actually basically measures customer reviews, so actual experience with different vendors globally, and aggregates that data to give specific technologies and software providers actual ratings. So yeah, there's many. I mean, G2 Crowd is one of the most prominent from a technology software perspective, software as a service perspective, but there's many of these platforms that you know, buyers in the marketplace can use to their benefit.
Okay, perfect.
Absolutely. Just to add on that, Claire, I think I'm in agreement with our colleagues in there, because people, they are in this hyper where they need technology for everything. As much as we understand the importance of technologies, but not everything needs a technology. Sometimes it's very important to do a thorough analysis and research. If you really need an AI-driven product, then how is it really going to help your organization or your company to be more productive and effective? So in that regard, you need to check everything in details on how is it really going to help you, and then in that case you can start developing the AI solution. But as our colleagues have mentioned, that not everything needs an AI. Sometimes we can do things ourselves. Sometimes there are products that really needs an AI-driven solutions. Thank you so much.
Perfect. No, I've got one more question. One last question. What computing power is essential for successful implementation of AI?
Well, in that case, it should be a processing power capacity. Remember that AI is processing an enormous amount of data, and the data needs to be available all the time when the user needs it. So it's very important to make sure that your power processing capacity is out of this world. It needs to be make sure that at least is high enough to contain that leverage amount of people that will be requesting that. And also, one of the major things in AI you need to consider is that the advancement in algorithm, and need to make sure that your algorithms, they are more dynamic. You need to make sure that when they change, or something has changed in the question or in whatever that they are doing, the user are doing online, that your algorithms need to know how to adapt with such questions and make sure that without any interactive of the user involvement, and they change themselves. So a capacity, a performance, and advancement in algorithm, I would say those are the important key on the computing power of AI.
Anyone else? Everyone happy with that?
Yeah, look, I think you've got an opportunity with cloud to have, in terms of computing capacity, to suffice to your needs. That's what you need. You don't need more than your needs. And cloud gives you that ability to, okay, I need more tomorrow. I can change my server. I can go to a more powerful server. And don't forget, you're dealing with different kinds of servers, CPUs, GPUs. You really need to understand that environment. It's not a simple thing of just throwing more capacity. You might, of CPU power, you might need more memory. It really depends is the answer.
Yeah, and the cloud deployment model, kind of hybrid multi-cloud, is all about elasticity. It's exactly that. It's fitting the resource requirement to your demand and not over provisioning or under provisioning, and having that flex and scale and mold itself to your requirements in real time. So
So infrastructure for AI is not a one-size-fits-all sort of scenario, is it? It depends what your business is, and
it is the least one-size-fits-all of any infrastructure.
Okay, great. So I think we are, unfortunately, I'm so sorry about Lavina that we couldn't get the last speaker on, but I think we are going to leave it there. And thank you everybody for joining us today, even through the ups and downs of no signal or too much signal or whatever we're doing, whatever we're coping with at the moment. I just wanted to thank our sponsors once more, IBM and Meltwater. Thank you again for sponsoring, and again to Machine Learning Africa for organizing the conference. And yeah, we hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Claire. That was great.
Thank you. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.